our meeting this evening. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you that you've provided us so much, such a wonderful community, such great prosperity, such good health and family. We thank you for these and ask that as we deliberate this evening that you would guide us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I call this meeting of the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission to order. We have 100% attendance and thus a quorum. Announcements.
I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that at this point, we do not have anything scheduled for the June 17th meeting, but I intend to bring that up again under new business if the Planning Commission wishes to cancel that meeting. And then we do have a couple of items, Hill Farm and another cell phone tower, that look like they're going to be ready for the first meeting in July.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the minutes of the meeting for May 15th. Everyone's had a chance. Is there a motion related to accepting the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Motion's been made to accept them. Is there a second? Second. Made and second. Let's proceed to a vote. It is unanimous with Mr. Gustafson abstaining. I believe he was absent that evening. Thank you. Unfinished business? Then the next item on the agenda is back to SUP 15-0001.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Again, for the record, Patrick White, planner, Spotsylvania County. Last month at the May 6th meeting of the Planning Commission, the subject case was continued after receiving input from the public. The case we have since received some additional correspondence, which we have relayed to you. That correspondence included more than approximately, it included 7 emails in opposition on a variety of different concerns, including environmental, the preference for co-location, and a concern related to the proximity to nearby communities. We received a packet from the applicant detailing the environmental responses and actions that they had taken as far as with respect to the allegations that the site was contaminated. We received a petition with comments and signatures of about 80% Fredericksburg residents. It was signed by 124 signees, predominantly within Fredericksburg, at least according to what the internet tablet, the spreadsheet had to say. We received a packet from the Spotsylvania Historical Association Incorporated requesting that the Planning Board recommend to push the subject tower further back into the Catlett property and to lower it to 80 feet. You've also received that. We received a packet from Councilor Pugh on behalf of the Spotsylvania Historical Association with a minor correction. We received a response from our county consultant, Atlantic Technologies Consulting, finding that should the subject tower be pushed back as the Spotsylvania Historical Association requested, that it would have a negligible loss in signal, however, an increased likelihood of FCC potential permitting trouble. We received a legal opinion from the applicant's counsel, Herschel Fleischer. And notably, we received a revised GDP from the applicants proposing to lower the subject tower 20 feet to a new proposed height of 179 feet in its present location. That change to the GDP also allowed them to shrink the equipment area from 50 by 100 to 40 by 90. The applicant is here. I know that they did take some additional balloon photos of the balloon that they flew at the new height, and I believe there are photo sims that may benefit you if you'd like to see them. And otherwise, I'll stand by for any further questions that you have.
Thank you. Additional questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
I always wanted this thing to be set far back off the road. And I understood what the presentation was the last time, it's the government agencies interacting together. And I've gotten this letter here that said it can be located in the core of the battlefield. But also, you just mentioned that there may be some licensing issues. Is that a fact or just an assumption, or?
I was reading through the NEPA documentation that the applicant provided. In there, the reason that I said it, that I agree with our consultant, there is a document that expressly states, it's a woman from the American Battlefield Protection Program. It did expressly note that, and I paraphrase, following the military terrain analysis previously conducted, and provided the location remain outside of the core area of Chancellorsville, that they didn't have any further objections. That's why I think there could be trouble if it's pushed into the core.
Because if it's going to be a licensing problem, it makes the tower useless.
It could, yeah. The American Battlefield Protection Program is the responsible body that drew the core line. I did look into that further also. This was one of your questions that came up previously.
Thank you.
And who authorized them to draw this line?
I suspect, I don't know offhand.
Well, who do they,
They're-
are they part of the Park Service?
Yes.
Are they the Park Service?
I think they're a branch of the Park Service. I don't know that they are the Park Service.
They're not employees of the Park Service?
The American Battlefield Protection Program structurally appears as part of the Park Service.
Any other questions? Did the applicant want to share anything additional?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I'm going to try to address just a couple items. First, I'm not sure it was clear from Patrick White's comments, but the the new petition are, those are people in favor of the site, the 134.
And while he was commenting that these were Fredericksburg addresses, I'm sure he meant that they were Spotsylvania County addresses with a Fredericksburg zip code, as opposed to the city of Fredericksburg.
So just to summarize a couple things, the modifications to the application are 20-foot height reduction, 2, smaller compound, and 3, graduated paint. So it will be painted, everything, the structure and all appurtenances would be painted sky color. Above the tree line, below the tree line, it would be painted dark green or brown. As far, the line is the line. We didn't draw the line. This is probably one of the top 5 battlefields related to the Civil War. The historians who are most familiar with it drew the line, and as we understand it, and there seems to be some disagreement here, but it's called a core because inside the core is where the casualties were. It's been stated that the casualties took place right where we are now, but the core line, as I understand it, is inside the core is where casualties were, outside the core is where troop movements, whatever were. It took us 14 months to get the support, to get a finding of no adverse effect. Could we get from the DHR? If we went inside the core, could we get that? I don't know. Tens of thousands of dollars later, another 14 months, and maybe it's 80 feet, which Verizon's here tonight to point out that that won't work. There's a big area that's trying to be covered. There's a letter I saw from May 29th where there were conversations with DHR. Maybe it could go in there, and it depends. But I mean, this is 14 months later, we're finally at a no adverse effect. another 14 months, another, tens of thousands, and who knows what the outcome might be. The other issues just about this request to move, I mean, there are three reasons why we can't move. One, the DHR uncertainty, which I just discussed. The second is there's a stream, and the permits and the construction cost for crossing that stream, in our estimate, are $70,000, and we can't afford that. It's just too much money. And the third one, it's probably the first one I should have mentioned, is that we don't have the right to go back there. We have a contract with the Catlets to be where we are, and they don't want us back there. And so those are the three reasons: the DHR uncertainty, the cost, and the contract. Any other questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, then the chair will entertain a motion related to the application.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I appreciate everybody's patience in letting us have a chance to review all the documentation that was submitted to us over the past 30, 35, 40 days. I think I've learned more about cell towers than I ever thought I would. But I do appreciate everybody's patience, and I appreciate everybody's comments and concerns. In my opinion, there are merits to the application that I think are compelling. First and foremost, or first, is that the cell tower, in no doubt, would provide a better opportunity for businesses and residents to utilize internet and cell service so they could enjoy working at home and getting off our congested roads. I think that would help. Number two, somebody stated in the audience that it would also provide an educational tool to our students that is part of their curriculum today, so an added benefit there. And then most importantly to me is the public safety aspect of it. We need cell phone service in this area for our first responders, for people to get a hold of first responders. And I just think it's critically important that we improve that infrastructure. So with that, I would ask my fellow commissioners to support this application, and I move to approve it.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Seeing no more comments or questions, let's proceed to a vote. A vote in the affirmative recommends adoption or issuance of the special use permit. It is 6 in the affirmative and 1 abstention, so the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is
Mr. Chairman, just
sorry.
real quick, I did have a conflict, and that's why I had to do the abstention. So, okay, thank you.
Understood. Thank you for the explanation. Proffer update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I wanted to provide you with a brief update. I went to the Board of Supervisors at their request at their last meeting to bring up the draft proffer guidelines again, and we had probably about a half an hour discussion on the topic, so I wanted to provide the Planning Commission with an update. First, I'll start out by letting you know that I did update the proffers according to the methodology that had been established, with some additional information that is new, which is actually very timely. Should the board decide to adopt this in the near future, it will be updated for this year. The proffers before you on the screen are slightly different than what I had reviewed with the Planning Commission a few months ago. The figures that you see at the bottom in yellow actually are a little bit less than what we had reviewed with the Planning Commission, and the reason behind that is that we have updated the, one of the variables that goes into the calculations is the population, and we do now have July 1st of 2014 census estimates. They went from 129,340 people to, or excuse me, 127,348 people to 129,188. So that affected all of the facilities where we had an existing level of service. When you have a certain number of facilities and you spread the use of those facilities over more people, the cost per facility does go down a little bit for each of those. So that population affected these to some extent. The other big change came from the budget adoption, and that was the capital improvements program. And in particular, that is critical for the transportation element here. The transportation is based on the actual projects in the capital improvements program. So that's what's reflected here is our adopted FY16 CIP. And then the debt service credit was adjusted slightly because there was a drop in the personal property tax by a few pennies. The Board of Supervisors had a few questions. In particular, they did focus on the biggest category, the schools category, and had some questions related to the magnitude of that number. They talked about the 30-year question related to fiscal analysis, and a couple of comments were made that debt service credit or the 30-year fiscal positive credit should be given, but not both. So there was some discussion that they were willing to look at some sort of credit, but not both the debt service and allowing the fiscal positives from a project to offset capital costs. That was just a couple of people that made those comments, though. I don't have any, I didn't have a majority of the board saying one way or another on that topic. There were a few comments as well related to that topic. Concern about the fact that if commercial is not committed to early in the project, they're concerned about giving credit for tax revenues associated with commercial, and maybe there needs to be a formula that prorates that in our analysis, was another comment that came out. There was discussion about whether Spotsylvania County still qualifies as a high-growth locality, and I went back and double-checked this. I had done this about a year ago, but I couldn't remember what the formula was, and in the state code, it's a 5% population increase, looking between the 2000 and the 2010 census, so we obviously meet that with our growth rate over that 10-year period. So the board had a few questions and a few comments, but again, I didn't get a sense from a majority of the board in terms of what direction they're heading on any particular topic. So I am expecting that they will ask for this to come back again at some point in the future.
And you may have answered this, but I may have missed this. The fiscal impact that keeps coming up in every single case, which is a different argument than the proffer analysis. Tell me where, and I know you mentioned that with the schools, but actually that's an impact that affects every single one of those components. So that's where I got confused.
Right.
If you wouldn't mind clarifying that.
Yes, there were a couple of supervisors that felt that a credit in terms of either debt service credit or the positive fiscal benefits, a credit for that, should be taken into account, but not both. So that was thrown out there as either or. So in the end, it could be that the board ultimately adopts these proffers without that debt service credit, or it could be that they adopt it with the debt service credit, but do not allow the fiscal benefits of a project to be counted as an offset to capital facilities in the future.
Okay, so just to clarify, and I think you and I are on the same page, we definitely need a decision from the board on whether that's to be allowed or not, so we could have consistency of thought in all future applications. Because right now, we don't have that decision, so we're really ad-libbing every single time.
Yes, and as I said, a couple of supervisors touched on that point, but not enough of the supervisors for me to say there was a clear majority that felt one way or another.
And didn't we, as a commission, though, recommend adoption of the debt service credit and not take into it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And they're aware of that?
They are aware of that, yes.
Okay.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. So, next issue on the agenda is new business, and the planning director pointed out that we probably won't have any business, or at least we don't have any scheduled for 2 weeks from now at the present. So if it's agreeable to the commission, we'll cancel the next meeting scheduled for June 17. Does that require a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I'll entertain a motion that we cancel the meeting of June 17.
I'll make such a motion.
Motion's been made, second, and seconded. Thank you. Let's proceed to a vote. I'm going to predict it's unanimous, and it is.
Yes.
Meeting canceled. Any other new business? Seeing none, the next public comment for this evening. Welcome. The regular public hearing rules apply, and I'm sure you're aware of them, so welcome.
Thank you. My name is Claude Dunn, live 9743 on behalf of Faith and Freedom Ministries. Voice, I got a real bad cold this evening. I wanted to speak to you for a minute about fundamental right and wrong. Can you hear me okay?
A little bit, maybe you could move a little closer. Thank you, that's good.
I wanted to speak for just a moment about fundamental right and wrong. Too often we come here and discuss the pros and cons of a particular issue without thinking about the fundamental right and wrong. I mean, our nation was founded because people's rights were being violated over in Europe. We think fundamentally of the right to worship God as they saw fit, but there are many other things. Raise up their children the way they wanted to, have a farm, whatever they wanted the occupation to be, have the freedom to do that without getting less license and permits from the government. Fast forward, we end up with a government with all authority coming from we the people. This is not a majority decision. Government is a instrument of force, if you will. It compels people to do whatever its decrees are. And the authority comes from the people, and the people cannot decree an authority to use force beyond what they have in their possession to use that force. As an example, if I contract, I don't like the color of one of your houses, and I contract with someone to go paint the house a color I like, probably lock them up and lock me up too, and justly so. But somehow today, coming forward, we find that we're doing that sort of thing through the Planning Commission. I submit to you that that's fundamentally wrong. Now, I don't know how we get back to where we need to be. I'm not sure when the Planning Commission came to Spotsylvania County. If any of you know, I'd appreciate if you let me know. I'll have to research that a little bit. But we have gone very far back down the road to this socialist mindset that majority determines everything, that nobody actually owns anything outright, that it's community that should make all the decisions. And this is absolutely contrary to everything this country was founded upon. So I just ask you to consider that when we cell tower things, so many pros, so many cons. It's not a question of pro and con. It's a question, what does a man have a right to do with his own property? If he's not harming anybody, if he's not materially harming somebody, you have no right to step in and prevent him from doing whatever he wants to do. That's his business. He bought it. He paid for it. And the same goes for your property and my property. We all have that right. That's why we have America. I think the Planning Commission, or the idea of having planning within the county, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the county having a planning group to plan out the county buildings and the county infrastructure and that sort of thing. It's all necessary. We can't just go willy-nilly and do things. We like to see things in an orderly fashion, and courtroom, police department, all those sort of things. But at the same time, we've gone so far down the wrong road, it's pathetic. And I just ask you to please search your hearts, talk to the Lord about it, and see what He has us to do. You know, I think that the dark side, if you will, somehow has brought this idea into America, and we're finally waking up to it, and it's time for us to take a good hard look at it and see what we can do to start sending it down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did anyone else wish to make a comment? Very well. Well, I would like to respond just for a moment to Mr. Dunn's comments. Unfortunately, as he's observed, we are under much federal scrutiny, and a lot of the things that we can't do are because of state and federal regulations, which everyone knows that I believe there is unanimously despised by this body. And as we approach the community's business, we have to take into account that the property rights of one individual or business certainly at times conflict with the neighbors, and I think we have done a good job. I think all of you serving on this commission have done an excellent job at trying to balance one person's property rights against the property rights of others. And thus, I will entertain a motion to adjourn unless someone else wishes to add something.
I do have a request of staff. I just read in the paper here this past week, we've been accused of passing 5,000 permits to build homes in Spotsylvania. And I talked to you some time ago about the buy right and the zoning changes, and I would like to have a sheet that differentiates buy right from the requests that we hear here. And I want to know how many of those 5,000 units have been built, and how many of them are buy right, and how many of them are zoning things that we've created over the past 4 years. Because there's a lot of misinformation in the paper, and I'd like to have this so I could go to the paper and straighten it out.
May I add something to that?
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, ma'am.
Not only that, I think that it certainly would be to the advantage also to have if it's 5,000 that's been approved, what is the time? Is it 30 years? Is it 20 years that the build-out's going to be? You know, so many times the paper comes along, and the paper will say, oh, you approved this and that, you know. But it's a build-out of how many that's supposed to be built in a certain length of time. And that certainly is. And I think I've asked you this quite a few times. Are we at our 2% growth?
No, we're at 1.17 this past year.
We have what? Absolutely, and I keep saying it over and over and over, because years ago, it was 2% growth, correct? And we haven't hit that 2% yet. We get accused of that, but yes, the paper does. I mean, they won't print that. They don't want to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to add a little more. I'm convinced that a lot of these things we rezoned, a lot of these 5,000 units, that they don't have any plan of building them anytime in the near future. I know some of them, they may start and have a 15-year build-out, but I think there's several of them, they don't plan on building them for years and years and years. In fact, there's one I won't mention. I am positive that they got zoning permission to build so that they can sell this land later at a higher price to someone else who will develop it. So the paper just prints flat facts, flat numbers, without researching the facts behind these numbers. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
May I still add something else? And we say, and what's so tough for us is that I wish they would start building some. I wish we could have some of our people, many of our people, all of our people in Spotsylvania County with a job. I would like to see every person in Spotsylvania County that they could have a job and they could put a meal on their child's table, on their table, so that the children could eat. I cannot tell you of how many organizations today are feeding those who are homeless, who are living in automobiles because they don't have a job. And yes, I would sit here and try to support rezonings, if that's what it takes, for our people to have a job and those dear children could be fed. Thank you.
The one good thing I can report on the way here this evening, I passed through Centerport Park, not Centerport, South Point Parkway, and the apartments that were rezoned as part of the mixed-use project there, there's a sign indicating that they will be available in 2016 across from the CarMax there. So that's, and then they have facilities there to indicate that they're ready to do that very soon.
And you see people working.
It was after hours when I drove here, so I didn't see anybody working, but I presume they are.
We
Anyway,
can take some pictures of people.
there you go. Well, all right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's proceed to a vote. It is unanimous, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.